Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm chatting with directors Anna Rodgers and Shaun Dunne about their powerful documentary, How to Tell a Secret. So thank you guys so much for chatting with us. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous film. It's so powerful and unusual. Can you tell me a little bit about where the idea came from?
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, the idea for the film came from the play, really. Shaun wrote an amazing play that blew me away. I went to see it in the project. And I suppose, yeah, it's not every day you go see a play and then approach the person who starred in it and wrote it and ask them, hey, let's go and make a film about this. But yeah, we met up afterwards to talk about it. And I had been interested in HIV for a while and thought about making like a documentary, but then that never seemed quite right and didn't get off the ground. And then obviously, Shaun, you were working on HIV storytelling for a good few years before I came into your life.
So yeah, the project actually began, the theatre piece began in 2016. But Anna actually came to see the show when it was on tour in 2019, and she came to see one of the final performances in Project Arts Centre. And it's funny because we always say it was the worst show that we had over our entire run because we had a film design element in the theatre project, but that was the night that none of it worked. So we had to perform the show bald. And I always say it was kind of poetic actually, because obviously we went on to adapt the play into something that was far more cinematic. And that was the night that Anna was in the audience, and like that, you know, the worst thing that could have possibly have happened for us as performers happened. But Anna didn't really even know the difference.
Yeah, I didn't notice. Like, I obviously you guys were incredibly professional and kept going. And because I didn't know it was supposed to be there, I didn't miss it. But it's funny you saying that now. It just struck me that in a way, I wonder if the fact that it wasn't there and it was a bit more raw, like allowed me to imagine things so much more. Because we always talk about like the fact that, you know, when you're in the theater, you go off and you kind of go off into the world of your imagination. And maybe if I was stimulated more by screens, I wouldn't have started dreaming up the story in a way that it was probably why it became so cinematic for me. And I thought this is a play that would really work well as a kind of a documentary hybrid kind of thing. So we met up and talked about working together, and bearing in mind, like as like a filmmaker, that's a pretty unusual thing when you don't know somebody. Like we didn't know each other at all. So you know, we met for a coffee and talked about collaborating, you know, directing together. Rather than me asking Shaun, hey, like I really liked your play, can I option the rights to it? I thought it would be much more interesting to artists coming from kind of different disciplines who find a common ground and find a common language and a way to tell this story, and not as a straight up documentary, but as something neither of us have ever done before. So that's what we did.
It's a very confident put together piece. Like it you do get that sense where it's neither but both, but it feels very strong when you watch it, and very like a whole, like it's been completely figured out. Like I'm sure you have figured it out, but it just, I don't know, it seems to gel very well. Because I was even like, when you hear the description, you're like, oh, okay. But actually, when it's there, it feels so natural and gorgeous, and you're not predicting it, and it doesn't feel contrived, for want of a better word, where, you know, sometimes theater does not translate to screen. And I was like, but this is so emotive. And I think it's that kind of meta nature of the actors interacting with the work, interacting with ye. Like it's very powerful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Really glad that it worked. Yeah, like we had an amazing editor, and I think, you know, this film, it was made twice, wasn't it, Shaun? Really, was made in the shoot and then made again in the edit, because things obviously you're asking for scenes to talk to each other, and they're stylistically quite different to each other, and you're trying to move from drama, performance, abstract moments then into kind of more traditional documentary scenes. And I suppose, yeah, there was definitely a few moments where I was a little bit worried. I don't know, Shaun, did you feel the same at times where you start wondering, is it going to all come together? Will it flow? Will it work? Because neither of us have seen a film that did that before in this way. I don't think, anyway.
I think there was definitely times in the edit process where we had questions, but I think I was confident that it would lend itself to screen. And one of the reasons for that really was because I always in my theatre practice work with screen actors. So I think in terms of you picking up on that piece of it not feeling like super contrived, like Eva J, Jade, Lauren, the people who are taking on people's testimonies, they're film actors primarily, and often within our theatre we're told that it's too filmic, as in we're not kind of doing that thing of like really pushing the theatricality of it. Like we're really always trying to pull it down. And one of the main things that I'm always trying to do with actors is like try and get them to not pretend too much and to let themselves be let pass through them a little bit. You know what I mean? And I think that that's hopefully what happens in the film. There's a sense of things passing through people and a problem being halved and shared and all that kind of stuff. But it was amazing to work in terms of the structure. Like we'd taken a lot from the structure of the play, but we'd done such lengthy interviews that kind of really got to broaden it out and expand on the universe of the material that we had originally. So for me in the edit, that was the really fun part, was seeing where the direct contributions from Veda, Robbie, our anonymous contributor, like where they would go and how they would really give it like a new heart in a lot of ways. And that was really, really exciting.
Yeah, because you have the different layers of the different subjects, and then that kind of like narrative woven through it. But it feels very organic when you're watching it. It just has this lovely flow that you're just being kind of like taken through this world, and you come out of it, and there's all these real honest interactions, but yet it feels quite structured, but yet it doesn't at the same time. So it's a really interesting thing. I've never seen something like this before.
I think, like, in a way, we myself and Zlata often refer to performed reality. And like you do get sometimes where people kind of don't trust it or don't believe certain documentary moments when they're shot really beautifully. And Eleanor Bowman did a gorgeous job. So whether she was shooting the more drama moments or the documentary moments, she still brought that same cinematic feel to it. But like things can be planned, structured, set up and still be very real. Like I always think, there's no excuse for things not looking great if you've got a bit of time and you can kind of plan it out a little bit. So like, for example, I suppose you can still do a gorgeous slider moment into people arriving into a room, but not have to try and get it on the third take, like try and get it on the first take. And, we really tried to allow things happen for real. When Shaun and Robbie are doing the workshop with the actors, like we knew what we wanted to happen in the room there, but we didn't allow them to say, read the letter of testimony from the person who shared their HIV story. We didn't let them read that and rehearse it in advance. So like it was kind of even in the moments like that, like it's quite documentary, and I think even in the performances, the fact that like Jay Jordan came and joined the cast and she didn't perform in the play before, so it was new for her. And I think the fact that there wasn't like a huge amount of time to rehearse in advance. I know she was talking about that with us recently. It just brought a rawness and a freshness to things. Like she really was listening to things and experiencing them and learning on camera. So she felt like very like herself in it, her reactions. And I loved that blurring of the boundaries of who's telling their own story and who's real and who isn't real. Because we sometimes get feedback where people say, was that real? And they're talking about a scene that to me is so obviously real, but they weren't sure. And I suppose we always say to people, it's all real, all the stories that are being told are real. It's all based on real testimony and real interviews. But it's just playing with the language of how we capture that and how we
tell the truth. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did you guys develop this for the Arts Council scheme or just apply with it? Because it's quite a unique thing to pitch as well.
We knew that in the beginning, didn't we, Shaun? I think it's so long ago now.
Yeah, the Real Arts scheme is actually, I think we wouldn't have made this type of film except for the fact that we were working specifically under Real Art, because Real Art is looking as a fund, is looking to document an artistic practice. So a big part of what we're doing is showing art in motion. So you're showing me prepare the actors to deliver this testimony. We're showing Veda build a tribute to the Diceman, and that's very much within the real art framework, I think. So it was great to kind of have that guide and that steer. I know, Anna, that was something you were really interested in, was like, you
Yeah.
know, the kind of like behind the scenes, the elements. And so the Real Art Fund and our approach definitely blended quite a lot, but we made sure that, you know, ultimately it's a film that's artistic, but also representing the community and very much in the present moment. And I think it covers a lot of bases, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, it's definitely, it touches on so many things. And I think definitely from the Arts Council point of view, it's a wonderful version of what real arts can be, because you really do have two artists kind of sharing their practices and making something together, which is pretty unusual. Like, I'd love to see that happen again, but like, you know, with a dance artist, with a documentary maker, or, you know, whatever it might be. But you know, we applied specifically with real arts in mind and developed a script for real arts. And I wonder, would it have been funded through another funding scheme, like fair play to the Arts Council, because it's an unusual one. It's really hard to get documentaries off the ground in the first place, especially features. And yeah, it was so different. You know, I think it was great that they supported it, and it was the right one to be made in, because they don't give you a huge amount of input as well. Like, you're not getting notes, and you're not getting, you know, you're not under kind of a pressure to deliver a certain type of film that's going to sell in a certain way or anything like that. So you're free in a way to creatively explore what you want to make, which is kind of unusual, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing for a film like this as well. It meant that we could experiment, you know, because I think in other conditions, you're in a situation where you're having to really explain your experiment, and that can take the joy out of experimenting. And in this case, we just got to do it. We just got to put it in motion, and we were really trusted. So I know we're both really grateful to the Arts Council for that freedom, like Anna said.
Although we did have to explain it to each other, which is a whole other layer of.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Tell me about the collaborative process. Two very different mediums, two very different kind of points of view as well. And again, such an organic, free-flowing project. How do you guys kind of share the workload, make the decisions, organize stuff between you?
We do have different backgrounds, but ultimately we both work in documentaries, so our interests are the same, and we share a lot of the same reference points. We had the play to kind of lean on in some ways, but we also expanded and like brought in new contributors and new interviews. So there was a lot of building that had to be done, although there was a scaffold there maybe initially that other documentary filmmakers might not have. Like, you know, I'm coming from a theatre context where, like, the company that I work with, we're called Talk and Shop Ensemble, so we create everything in an ensemble. So the way I view directing isn't maybe as strict as how other people tend to view it, which is very like, you know, I'm across all the departments and I have to manage everything. Now, of course, that is the case when I'm directing on my own as well, like to a degree, but I try to be as collaborative as I can across the process. And you know, I'm definitely in the practice of trying to get better at collaboration with every project. It can be stressful, but I know, and you're kind of the same. I think you're a really collaborative director as well. That like,
yeah, like we, you know, I suppose over the years of working on things that are very sensitive topics, you kind of, you know, always end up in some way collaborating with your contributors, if you want to call it that, you know. So you're kind of used to taking on board people's views, and you know, and I suppose, yeah, working with crews, and it's kind of madness if you don't allow people express their creativity and listen to their input. And I worked with directors, because I produce sometimes, who don't allow that sometimes, and I think they're missing out, like, because you don't get the best from everybody then, because they don't give you the goods, they don't give you what they got, because you're not really showing an interest in their input. So like, I suppose on from that point of view, is quite used to working with people, but it's definitely hard, like, for sure, because you have to explain things that normally you just kind of do. And so suddenly you're kind of like, trying to define things or find language for stuff that maybe is really, really hard to put across. Like I remember a fellow director said to me, it's like, trying to kind of allow someone into your mind in a way, so like, especially when it comes to abstract kind of expressions of emotion like anger or stigma or rage or fear or whatever, like we were coming up with ideas of things we could film that weren't really very literal. Like some of them were a bit strange, and but like, yeah, I think we started to really understand each other. We split all the decisions like down the middle, and obviously at times where like Shaun was on camera, which was for lots of the scenes where he's performing as the Aaron character in the film, then Shaun had to trust me more because I was directing camera at that point. But for the rest of it, I suppose we were just always kind of checking in with each other all the time.
And for me, me as well, like what I would recommend for people who are entering into a partnership with another director, like I think it's important to be allowed to let, like, as in to not be afraid of letting the other person lead sometimes. Like there'll be days where, like, certain things are just more Anna's wheelhouse, for example. So I would be happy to kind of step back, or say, for example, Anna has an ongoing collaboration with our director of photography, Eleanor Bowman. So there'd be times where, like, on that communication piece, Eleanor just wouldn't understand me, but Anna could communicate it more effectively than I would. You know what I mean? And because me and Anna were more in conversation, you learn how to manage the kind of family dynamic by who can hear what when from who. You know what I mean? And that can be a bit crunchy sometimes, I suppose, in process. But ultimately, like, I think, yeah, as long as you try to practice a collaborative energy, like, in your mind, you'll get there eventually.
You've got to recognize like that, like recognize people's strengths as well. Like obviously, Shaun really knew Eva Jane Gaffney. They had performed together so much and done the play together, and the same with Lauren Larkin. So that was a little harder for me because I was kind of stepping into, almost like a friendship, circle that I was like outside of. So in that sense, letting Shaun kind of lead some of those conversations with the actors made sense because they all knew each other. But then it was nice that we had new people bring in a new energy that kind of allowed fresh things to happen too. And Jay Jordan joined the team. And then when we had our documentary people, our contributors who were telling their own stories, obviously that was all new as well, apart from Robbie Lawlor, of course, who was always part of the original play. So yeah, it was just a lot of, I suppose, a lot of talking. We had a lot of Zooms.
Yeah, a lot of talking.
And we kind of developed a script as well, that was the shooting script, which was taking the script of the play and adding in all the kind of visual ideas, adapting the play, because of course we couldn't shoot the whole play. And then, scripting out to an extent what we were going to shoot, documentary wise, which was very planned, but also allowed for things to happen like the Tommy Tiernan show, which, wasn't something we knew that was going to happen, but we responded to.
And I suppose that's the flexibility that really gives it life, because what you're doing is essentially documenting like a real cultural shift as well. Like I presume from even the time that the play was happening to now, like things have opened up. And I think you captured that and showed how your characters open up in that process as well, which is really beautiful. I think it captures this changing of the guard as well, I mean, the different generations. So it's so powerful to watch, and it does it again in such a unusual way that it's not, like directly guiding us. You don't feel like you've been manipulated either. Like you feel like it's such an organic process and a joy to watch. Can you mentioned as well that in the edit, that it was changed in the edit. Can you tell me about that? Is there a different version of this film maybe?
I mean, there's always kind of, another cut, especially a film like this, because in a way, like with drama films, I know people can sometimes disrupt the chronology of things, but generally speaking, people shoot the script, right? But with this, yeah, like, you could cut it in different ways, and there was some really creative things that our editor brought to the table and surprised us with. So our editor is Paul Mullen, who I had worked on some TV stuff with, but we didn't know each other that well, I guess. We never cut a feature together. And he edited Kim Bartley's film Pure Grit, and he had a lovely nature and was really creatively open and just the right fit for us, Shaun, wasn't he? He just really was very good at collaborating.
Yeah, and he like is again like he was. I think when we were finding an editor and like well anyone that we were working with, like they needed to be people who were kind of happy to lean into the experimentation. And he was all about that, and he wouldn't be afraid of making an unconventional choice. So he was a very interesting sounding board, I think, between the two of us because we would have our kind of experimental approach, and then he would also have his own. So we just offered so much to us. In terms of the structure of the piece, and like I think we had an idea in terms of like that the film would kind of end by pushing out of the theater, like you know what I mean. But really, I think what really changed our structure the most was the fact that we had so much time in between pockets of shooting because we were obviously living through various lockdowns. So our shooting script and our paper edit, like per se, that had the time to expand when, between day 3 and day 4, there might have been a month that passed. And that again isn't something that happens quite typically with film. So we had the opportunity to revise our intention and to kind of like just re-examine stuff and make sure we were heading in a direction that we were happy with. And that probably wouldn't have come outside of the context of lockdown as well. So just another interesting factor that was within our process for this already quite complex piece.
It seems to have, for some people, it depends when lockdown hit. Like in some people, like it has destroyed their projects and made things very difficult. But a lot of people were saying that it has given them time to reflect on the work that they wouldn't have had because they were pushing for a release or like that. Like it gave yet more time had passed or like a different view or made them think of things more creative. So it's different, like how it impacted different people in different ways. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that movement through this linear story of the characters, the kind of the book ending of the theater show, but then you are capturing these different moments, and some of the stories are so heartbreaking in between. And I'm just wondering, how did you find people have react to it? Because even the premise of it, something, how to tell a secret, like, I mean, this is just that shame that people have been carrying around and the pain that people have been carrying around. Like it feels so visceral when you're watching it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's been, we've had really emotional screenings, and really amazing reactions from people. And, people come up to us sometimes and don't say very much, and just give us a hug and say thank you in a way that you're kind of going, oh, they definitely have had some experience. It might have been a friend, it might be themselves, it might be their brother. You just don't know. But yeah, we've had a lot of people really delighted that the film was made as well, to get people talking about it, because it doesn't happen often enough. And you've had a lot of people coming up to you since the play as well, right, Shaun? So this is kind of like a full circle.
For me, in terms of the film, I feel like I think the film, comparatively response wise, the film ends in it's a far more optimistic offer, I think. And like you were kind of saying, Jem, like there's a changing of the guards, and like things have been changing so much for the community, for the HIV positive community in Ireland over the last few years, that like this film, I think, is quite a celebration. Whereas when we did the documentary theatre piece, it was still at a time where people weren't happy to be on stage, they weren't happy to show themselves, and it was quite, there's something quite there was a melancholy to that, I suppose. And now with our film, the response for me, just comparatively, has been seismically different, because people are there with us and everyone's kind of on the stage at the end with us when we do a screening. And yeah, it just feels like a far more unifying experience, actually. So in terms of a full circle moment, I feel like we've really brought the whole community into the room with this film, which is a great feeling.
Yeah, and it is positive, I think. I mean, there's dark moments in it for sure. And people are talking about their struggle to tell their story and about the stigma they've experienced. So of course that's heavy at times. And the film is about disclosure, and sometimes when people do come out and tell people around them, they don't respond the way you might hope. And so we allow people, of course, to express that and to talk about that. But ultimately, like the really kind of galvanizing message in it is about one of positivity too, of like, you know, if you come out and tell your story, that, you know, I think one of the guys at the HIV event says, I guarantee your life is going to change, you know, and we see that happening to our characters in the film, I suppose, as well, like that it changes for the better. And the U=U message was one that we really wanted to be loud and clear in the film, and I think that's there. And that's that, you know, if you're on effective medication, if you're HIV positive, you cannot pass on HIV to a partner, and lots of people still don't know that. So we hope people will come see the film and learn that.
And it's a great message, and hopefully they will. So are you doing any Q&A screenings?
Yeah, so we're releasing the film for World AIDS Day, which I think is like the perfect date, and it's going to be in the IFI on the 1st of December, and we will be doing a Q&A for that screening, and then it is going to the Palace in Galway, it's going down to the Gate in Cork, and it's going to be in the Lighthouse Cinema from the 3rd. So we're going to have a Q&A event in the Lighthouse Cinema from the 3rd as well. And we just added the Stella to our cinema run, and we're talking to a couple of other cinemas. So watch this.
Fabulous. Okay, well, hopefully you'll get loads of bums and seats, and that's such a nice celebratory way to release it and get it out into the world. So I hope, thank you again for making such a beautiful film.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gemma.